I'm Chisgule Gaming, and in this video, we're going to talk about whether or not Constantine is still one of the best legendary commander investments in 2020. We're going to review his relevance and how the release of new commanders has changed significantly the role that he will play in Rise of Kingdoms, and we'll review the optimal talents and pairings for this commander. Stick around if you want to get the most out of Constantine. Hello my friends and welcome back. In this video, we're going to review Constantine in 2020, and there was a lot that has changed. If you like Rise of Kingdoms guides that help you get value and smash your enemies, consider subscribing to the channel for daily Rise of Kingdoms videos. We're a sponsored content creator, and this is one of my favorite infantry commanders, even into 2020, but the role has changed a lot. So here's our agenda for today. Timestamps, of course, in the description, so you can jump to whatever part is most interesting for you. First, we're going to talk about how Constantine's role has changed in 2020, and that shift is very meaningful. After we explore that, we'll review in depth the way that these skills work, and yeah, they're a little bit confusing, so this is very important to talk about. We'll then give you the building blocks for making an amazing talent build, and we've got a few that we'll recommend. We'll talk about how you unlock this commander, how you skill them up in an optimal way, and we'll conclude with the very best pairings, both for the open field and for Garrison in Rise of Kingdoms. Now let's start by talking about what has changed in 2020 for Constantine, and there's actually a lot. First and foremost, Constantine received a few buffs. One of them is that he takes, or rather provides, additional damage reduction for normal attacks against cavalry. This is directly making him a better counter to Attila Takeda, and yeah, he's really good at that if you're battling into Attila Takeda. But the biggest thing that influences the relevance of this commander is nothing to do with his own skills or talents, but actually has everything to do with other new commanders that have made their way into Rise of Kingdoms. Those two commanders are Theodora and Yi Sun Shin. These commanders are likely to be even better counters to Attila and Takeda. Specifically, Theodora removes all debuffs on her after she's expertised, and that is a hard counter to Attila Takeda, who has dominated the meta for a very long time, because that will clear some of the critical debuffs that Attila and Takeda are doing. So I believe that it's likely Charles Martel and Theodora will be the new counter to Attila Takeda. We have yet to see how all of that unfolds. There still is a lot of testing that needs to be done. But because other stronger Garrison commanders have made their way into Rise of Kingdoms, if you're thinking about going all in on Constantine in 2020, I'm going to encourage you to pump the brakes and ask yourself this question. Is Theodora going to be coming to your kingdom anytime soon? If not, and you're going to be battling against Attila Takeda, then I think that Constantine is still a great commander to go in expertise. However, if you are about to get Theodora, I might encourage you to hold off, because this commander will lose a good bit of relevance, both for defending your city and for defending against Attila and Takeda. And there's still more testing to be done. It could be that Constantine Theodora is the jam. We're not quite sure yet. I think it's going to be Charles Martel. We'll see. What I will say, however, is that this commander will always have relevance in Rise of Kingdoms, specifically for the open field and in Canyon. And in that regard, an investment in this commander will literally last you, in my opinion, forever in Rise of Kingdoms. And of course, 5 years from now, that might be different. But why is that the case? This 10% damage taken buff for all nearby friendly marches is as good as a Joan of Arc buff, almost. Reducing the damage taken is an astonishingly powerful buff, and 10% to all nearby allies makes him all but mandatory for a top-tier Canyon team and for battling in the Ancient Ruins and Altar of Darkness. Someone needs to bring this skill to the party in order to give literally everyone around you a phenomenal buff to your tankiness. I personally don't think that I had this commander at 5511 at the time of my last KVK, but I would recommend that if you have him at least as 5511, you use him in a murder ball in the open field, and you will use him in Canyon basically for the rest of time, unless some other buff comes out that gives even more damage taken reduction. This is reducing counterattack damage taken, normal attack damage taken, skill attack damage taken. I mean, it is phenomenal. So I really do believe that a 5511 investment into this commander will last you an extremely long time in Rise of Kingdoms. I still think they're worth expertising if you are a Garrison captain for Kingdom versus Kingdom, and you will be captaining against Attila Takeda. And after Theodora comes into the game, or if you're close to that point, I would truly pump the brakes on putting more skills onto this commander beyond a 5511. Let's go in depth and talk about these skills and their relevance in 2020, because there is some things we've learned that really do change the relevance of a lot of these skills. And they are very complicated as well. So let's review them. The first skill gives a 40% attack reduction, and it lasts for 5 seconds. This is a very, very powerful debuff. It influences the normal attack damage of your opponent, the counterattack damage, and the skill damage. It's very powerful against Attila Takeda, but really against anything. The only downside it's got is that it's hitting a single target, and I'll call attention to the fact that Theodora very likely will clear a debuff like this, which means that he's going to lose a good bit of value in an offensive punch, trying to swarm down a structure in Ark of Osiris. The next skill we know a lot more about today than we ever have in the past. He gives 40% health, and that is arguably the very best stat in Rise of Kingdoms. Card up in the top for the video where we prove that that is the case, and you really should go and check that out. You can watch that at the end of the video. Let's get a look at the next skill, which is going to increase your Garrison attack by 10%. Attack is a fine stat. It is the stat that I'm least interested in. Specifically for Ark of Osiris, I would prioritize health, then defense, then attack. However, it does apply to all units, so whatever's in that garrison does get attack, which is very powerful. You could think of it as 10% infantry attack, 10% cavalry attack, 10% archer attack, and 10% siege unit attack. It's a pretty meaningful boost of stats. You also reduce the damage taken from cavalry normal attacks by 10%. Worth mentioning that Attila Takeda that you're countering over here deals about 60% of its damage through normal attacks. So being able to reduce their normal attack damage by 10% is very meaningful. The next skill is the one that is extremely complicated. Let me walk through this. When the army led by this commander goes below 50% and they are not in your city, you will get a heal one time for 15,000 healing factor, which is a massive heal, by the way. You get a massive one-time heal, and you have to go back to your town before you can potentially get this to trigger again when you leave town. We tested this in Expedition to kind of confirm whether or not if you're defending your city, you'll get the heal, and in my testing, I did not. That might not be 100% representative of the real world, but that really isn't going to change whether or not you use Constantine to defend your city. There are other reasons why you would use him, largely because he's the best counter in conjunction with Charles Martel to counter Attila Takeda. That's why you'd use him, and it doesn't really matter whether or not you get that heal. Now, the next part of this is also really compelling. Whenever troop strength is below 50%, all healing effects received will be decreased by 30%. So if you were pairing with Constantine and Richard I, and you stay in the field for a very long time, or you're in a garrison, you might want to rethink that pairing because your healing will be reduced by 30%. That's a pretty meaningful cut to your healing. It's literally an Alexander the Great debuff worth of reduction to your healing. So if you pair this commander with a Richard, you will get a good bit of downside when you get below 50%. In addition, when you are in this state of being less than 50%, all skill damage taken is reduced by 40% when this skill is maxed. That is massive. That is a massive skill damage taken reduction. Very powerful in a situation like Ark of Osiris when your garrison's getting swarmed, or if your city were getting multi-rallied. And speaking of cities and Ark of Osiris garrisons, one thing that is very noteworthy about Constantine is the fact that he gives 20% of stats, that's 15 attack, 5 defense, to every single troop in your garrison. That's insane. That is insane. The only thing that is now more insane is the entrance of YSS, who's giving you 40% of stats to all troop types. It does come with a downside. You need to have more than one troop type present to get any benefit at all, which means YSS is less good in the field, but you don't care about that for YSS. You're using him only in garrison. Constantine, on the other hand, is usable in the open field because this is good in the field and good in the garrison, which is an important distinction. 20% of stats is really quite massive because if you're defending your city, you're going to have all 4 unit types represented, so you can think of this more like an 80% stat boost split across the 4 unit types that you'll have present. Constantine is good both in the field and the garrison, and his talents will support this. He is an infantry, garrison, and support commander. That is a very compelling combination of talent trees. Let's go give you some of the building blocks you would need to create an amazing build with this commander, and we've got a few variations already prepared for you. The first thing we need to talk about is just the support tree. In every build you do with this commander, you're going to use this base to go and get Rejuvenate. You generate 150 rage every time an active skill is used. That's 300 rage every skill cycle. So the primary uses an active skill and the secondary uses an active skill. This is an astonishing amount of rage gen. The remainder of these points are going to depend a lot on what you're doing. If you're defending a garrison like an Ark of Osiris, you really want loose formation for skill damage taken reduction. If you are pairing with a commander like Richard I who heals, yeah, you're going to want something like counterattack, which is going to give you a whole bunch of extra attack after you've gotten a heal. If you're in a game mode like Canyon or defending again against a swarm in Ark of Osiris, having something like emergency protection, which makes it so you take less skill damage after you've taken some skill damage, is going to be really good. But the base for any build is what you see selected here in blue. Now, if you are going to be in a open field capacity, there is a really easy direction that you go with this commander. You're going to go all the way up to elite soldiers. You're going to take fleet of foot. You're going to take strong of body, pretty much everything here. And then you're going to go and use any extra points to get things like loose formation, elixir, and you can make your way to emergency protection like we just talked about. But things get way more complex when we start to talk about defending your city. Because it's easy to say like, yeah, the open field build is get all the points in red, which is pretty much the case, by the way. You're really not going to want to miss strong of body for that health. 2% health on a single talent point is amazing. 3 points of that is Gangbuster. But defending something like a flag or for Ark of Osiris, it gets more complex. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If you're defending a flag, you're going to want a combination of talents like this in yellow. And I'm going to assume you're defending a flag against Attila Takeda, so I've avoided things like Impregnable, which are helping with skill damage. Well, you're not taking skill damage from Attila Takeda. You're not taking skill damage, so we're going to avoid things like loose formation, and we'll go in and we'll pick up some of these points over here in red. These are really solid points. A part of the reason infantry captains are so good against Attila Takeda is that you can get Iron Spear, 9% additional damage dealt, 9 rage a second from Undying Fury is completely Gangbuster. I like Call of the Pack because you'll get below 50% strength in a garrison situation. And yeah, defense of your troops goes up by 6%. That's a really good rate on your talent points. You'll use even more of your points if you have a full infantry flag to get strong of body and go all the way up to hold the line. Just make sure you really have all infantry in that flag. Now, if you were defending a structure in Ark of Osiris, I actually think there's a variant like this, which is a very compelling set of points I would advocate for. This is going to give you a 9% reduction when you're surrounded, which is absolutely happening in Ark of Osiris. So Know Thy Enemy is very good. Card up in the top if you want to see a much more detailed rundown of why that's the case. I also really like King's Guard, which doesn't work for defending cities, but does work for Ark of Osiris structures. Even if you're getting rallied with Attila Takeda, because you're going to get swarmed in Ark of Osiris, you want to get impregnable, you want to get loose formation, you are going to go and get these points I showed you earlier in blue, and you're going to get the points in red that I showed you over here in this flag build. It's a build that is really good against getting swarmed. Now, there is one last configuration we do need to talk about, and that is if you are defending your city and they are the primary. And I actually would not recommend that they be the primary for defending your city. The talents here are not that great for that operation. And the reason I say that is that while the support tree is really good, if what you're worried about is an Attila Takeda rally, there's a lot of points here that are going to be completely worthless to you. And the thing that most people should be worried about is an Attila Takeda rally. If you are going to use this commander for Garrison and you're going to have them as the primary, I would recommend that you go and you're going to get Nowhere to Turn, you're going to get Impregnable, you're going to get Rejuvenate, you're going to get all these talents over here that we showed you. You will go over and get Strong of Body. And from here, you know, you're kind of limited on the things that you can do to get some extra value. If you think your city might get like swarmed with multiple rallies, you could get Know Thy Enemy. And if you think multiple rallies are coming, then I guess it's okay that they're the primary, because then skill damage taken reduction is much more of a thing that will be relevant to you. Overall, I don't think they should be the primary, but you know, given the entrance of some new commanders in the game, I guess we'll see if that actually is the case. Let's go now and talk about the optimal order for powering up his skills. And I think this is one of the most straightforward commanders in the game. You're going to max the first skill. It's amazing. Always max the first skill on a combat legendary. From there, you're going to star him up once and max the second skill, because health is literally the best stat in the game. From here, if you want to use the commander in the open field, and most people do, you're going to star up to 4 so that you can hope as many points as possible end up over here, which will help you in Canyon, which will help you in the field. And over time, if you work your way to expertise them, great, you'll fill everything in. Otherwise, as you opportunistically apply points, hopefully they go to Cross of the Divine. This commander is unlocked from the Mightiest Governor. We'll put up onto the screen a diagram created by Stormy illustrating when these commanders do become available into the game. This is a pretty sweet diagram illustrating when that will happen. For most players, you won't get him from Mightiest Governor. The way that you will get him is from Card King. He'll show up in Card King something like 90 days after the last Mightiest Governor for him. Yes, that's really far down the road, but yes, he'll still be worth getting and taking to 5511 to literally transform your Canyon team. And if you want to be contributory in the open field in a very team-oriented way, like, yeah, bringing him in the field for this debuff is going to be a really big deal. Let's talk now about some of the pairings that you will use with Constantine to get some serious value, both in the field and in Garrison. We're going to break it down into those 3 categories. It's going to first be pairings with infantry in the open field. Then we'll do pairings with non-infantry commanders in the open field. Then we'll do garrison pairings. So first and foremost, infantry pairings for the open field. As long as you are staying over 50%, I think that Richard and Constantine are really tanky and offer some sick buffs and debuffs. The thing that's a little weird here is that Constantine kind of kicks in gear when he gets below 50%, but you generally don't want to get below 50% in the open field. So for that reason, I think Richard with Constantine is pretty okay, and when you get low, just go home, refresh your march, and then send it back out again. I would pick between the two, the Constantine as the primary for the rage gen and the rapid firing of the skills of these commanders. Another phenomenal open field commander pairing is going to be Charles Martel. Look, these two are great together, huge amount of tankiness and synergy. I love the march speed. Constantine needed that. The Richard Constantine pairing doesn't have it. I would recommend that you use the Constantine as the primary in this configuration. That way you get the benefit of the support tree for the open field. And yeah, I think it's really good for that. The next infantry commander we go and get a look at will be Guan. I think that Guan is not an ideal pairing. Your Constantine's really tanky. Your Guan is trying to do big damage. They really don't offer each other much synergy, and for that reason, I would not pair them together. Of course, we would be remiss to not talk about Alexander the Great. We recently made a commander guide for him, card up in the top if you're interested in seeing that 2020 guide for Alexander the Great. This pairing is phenomenal. You want to use your Constantine primary for the support tree. Alexander the Great will give you the speed that you always needed. 30% march speed is amazing. This might be the very best pairing of infantry commanders if you're going to bring a single march and you're trying to be supportive of what's happening on the field. One last pairing we need to go look at is going to be Leonidas. This is kind of an interesting pairing. There is a little bit of synergy between them. Constantine reduces the attack of the target, so if you use Constantine primary and Leonidas secondary, you will at least get a little bit of extra damage factor onto that primary target. I don't think that these are a particularly great pairing, although I suppose if you are going to run your march into the ground, which will be relevant, by the way, in a game mode like Canyon, then they are a pretty solid pair and you can do some pretty serious work. But overall, I'm not all that high on Leonidas as a commander to pair with or to use in the open field. Now let's go and get a look at the non-infantry pairings that we might recommend. One thing you could do is a Constantine primary, Esong secondary. That sounds weird, but what you're doing is hiding the Esong behind the Constantine. People might target Constantine, but they're way more likely to target your Esong if he were a primary. So using your Esong hidden behind your Constantine will give you a solid way to protect your Esong and get some value with him in the battlefield, even though they otherwise aren't all that synergistic. I would not recommend that you pair with other cavalry commanders, and I've glossed over almost all of them. One commander I will not gloss over, however, is Ethelfled. I actually use Ethelfled primary, Constantine secondary, and that is a really solid pair since I haven't actually 6-starred my Constantine. This is how I rapid fire my Constantine buffs, and I use this march, the Ethelfled march, as a frontline march with mostly infantry in Canyon. It's a phenomenal pair. I wouldn't use it in the open field, but for Canyon, it gets some serious value. One commander that is better than meets the eye is going to be Frederick I. The downside is that you don't have enough march speed, so if you're caught out, you're going to get shredded. For that reason, you might want to be a little bit cautious here. I would strongly recommend you use the infantry commander as the primary, that's the Constantine, and you'd better get every single march talent you can find so you don't get caught out of position. This is a march that's better used near your city rather than deep into enemy territory. Caesar is the same story, very tanky as a pairing. However, I really find myself not excited by it. Looking into other commanders, I suppose you could pair with El Cid. Only one skill here cares about archers. The other one actually kicks into high gear when you're below 50%, and I guess if you're going to run your Constantine into the ground, this pair is better than meets the eye. The support tree is going to power out a lot of famous warrior. That's going to disarm the target, making it so they can't use normal attacks and active skills. Honestly, I don't know, maybe we should be thinking about that as a pairing. It's a lot better than I had expected. One pair that is fine, but I really can't wholeheartedly recommend is Mehmed. You're not getting the skill damage bonus synergy like I really would have liked. However, if you use that support tree primary, you're going to give Mehmed a lot of tankiness. But again, same thing with Caesar, same thing with Freddy. You'd better be near a city if you're going to do that. Otherwise, you could get really shredded. No, I think the thing we need to do now is get a look at Garrison pairings, because there was really, like, the only valid open field pair I feel was the Ethelfled and Constantine, and that's just for Canyon, really. The Garrison pairings are where things get way more spicy. Let's start with Constantine Esong. If you're defending your city, I think it's pretty sick as a pair. Between the two, I do think Constantine is a better primary than Esong. The next pair is Charles Martel Constantine. I mean, this is the counter in season 2 and 3 for Attila Takeda. Use use the Charles primary, the Constantine secondary, and you're going to do some really serious work. The next Garrison commander we should go and get a look at, and it's kind of remarkable how few I actually have powered up over here, would be YSS. This is an interesting pairing. I think that between the two, I do kind of prefer, I think I prefer the Yi Sun Shin as the primary commander. I think I do prefer Yi Sun Shin as the primary commander, and this is more for defending your city or Ark of Osiris. Artemisia and Constantine is not a natural pairing. I would not recommend that you pair them because they both care too much about having a different type of troop. You really want infantry if you're going to use your Constantine. You really want archers if you're going to use your Artemisia. They're not a natural pairing. I do think, however, that Theodora is a really solid pairing with Constantine, as is Wu Zetian. Neither of these commanders care about what type of troop you bring, so you can bring all infantry with a Wu Zetian. You can bring all infantry with a Theodora and do really great. These will be, I think, very good pairs that are worthy of additional testing as the latest and greatest meta unfolds. Let's get a look now at the epic infantry pairings that you might do with a Constantine. If you were defending your city, you could use Constantine and Sun Tzu. Between the two, I suppose Constantine might be the better primary commander, but that's arguable and up for debate. I like this pair in the field, but they will be lacking march speed, so if you're using them, they had better be very close to your city. Otherwise, you could easily get caught out of position. Similarly, I like the Olgi Mundok, but it's a full tier or two below the Sun Tzu. There is even less tankiness in your Olgi Mundok, and while he has some anti-swarm technology, this is a pair that might be left best for the early game when you are first maxing, a legendary commander and you maybe just unlock Constantine. But honestly, I would veer away from using these two as a pair. Now, as a Garrison pair, I think they're totally fine. But in the field, you've got way better options. Speaking of pairings for the field, looking at a few other epics that we might consider, you really should not pair with any of the archer or cavalry commanders. You could pair with Scipio, I suppose, for some tankiness. Constantine primary, Scipio secondary would actually be astonishingly tanky. I might talk myself into that for like a canyon situation in the early game, but I wouldn't use it in the field. I like the pairing of Constantine with Joan of Arc. This is a very natural and effective pairing. Constantine is buffing, and also Joan of Arc is buffing. Using that pair will give you more buffs than probably any other pairing you could ask for to every nearby march. The downside is that there's no march speed. So you're really relying on hasty departure in order to navigate the battlefield and not get caught out of position. Hasty departure, by the way, is a talent in the support tree. Both Joan of Arc and Constantine have it. I would recommend Constantine be the primary because the infantry tree is a lot better than the integration tree for open field. Boudica is an interesting pair that you certainly could do. You're still going to be lacking march speed. However, I would recommend the Constantine be the primary because integration tree is not very good. I love that Boudica is going to be buffing and debuffing and doing damage and generating rage. She's actually a pretty decent pair for your Constantine. The last commander I want to get a look at is Osman. This would be a very strange pair to use in the open field, but if you did, use Constantine primary, Osman secondary. You're basically hiding the Osman behind the Constantine in order to do lots of damage. And the thing that I like about that is that Osman always wanted a rage engine to fire off skills more frequently. That's because Sword of Osman goes off every time an active skill is used. That's 400 damage factor per active skill, 800 for every cycle of those active skills. That I think is very, very solid. For that reason, I suppose if you're in the open field near your city, you could do it. But if I'm just real with you for a second, the top pairings are going to be Joan of Arc and Sun Tzu at the epic tier. Anything else, I would sort of tilt my head and look at you funny and say, why are you doing that? This is a commander that I think, because of the nature of their AoE buff, is going to be relevant in this game for a very, very long time. And although the role they play will diminish over time, as more and more very focused legendary commanders enter into the game, I do think that they will have a long-term role. And for that reason, when we talk about the commanders that you should invest in Rise of Kingdoms, we always recommend Esong first. Then we recommend that you do either Alexander the Great or Constantine. Constantine is one commander who will be buffing all your nearby allies, and he's a little bit of a flavor choice because I think most people are going to go for Alex, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. In my video where I recommend the optimal sequence of legendary commanders to invest in, I advocate pretty heavily for Constantine for just how insanely transformative he was for my Canyon team and for open field combat. But there is a very good argument to be made that the order should be Esong, Alex, and then 5511 your Constantine. Either way, he's still great. And if you're in the early game, yeah, you should definitely be investing in him. If you found this video helpful, do me a favor, throw a like on the video. It supports the channel and is 100% free to you. And if there's any advice you would have for players with Constantine, or you're considering investing in them yourself, do me a favor and leave a comment down below with your thoughts on Constantine in 2020. If you're looking for more things to watch, check out those cards that we shared earlier. There will be a link up in the top, depending on what device you're using, or a little button you can press to show every single card that we've shared in this video. Until next time, my friends, you have fun smashing the kingdom.